Good day. Professor Didi here today to talk to you about governing regimes and to give you an idea about different types of government systems and things like that. Democracy is a form of government where the right of the governed is vested in the citizens of a country or state. It is exercised through majority rule. The word is derived from the Greek form of popular government. Direct democracy has often been criticized as mob rule. Referendums are a form of direct democracy where citizens vote on specific issues. This happens in California and places like Switzerland and France. When it comes to thinking about citizenship, the characteristics of the ideal democratic citizen: tolerance, active participation, high levels of interest in information, and support for the state. Do we have this in America? An illiberal democracy is an oppressive regime that runs roughshod over rights and freedoms, that was democratically elected in a free, fair election, but then once taking power, chaos occurs. Representative democracy is where people do not rule directly, but through elected representatives. This is what we have in America. In a representative democracy, popular representation, electing your leaders is important. It shows the legitimacy of the government. Representative democracy is the only workable system because a national government needs millions of people to vote to make decisions. Policymakers must obtain support of citizens because they are directly accountable to citizens through elections. Characteristics of representative democracies: political accountability, political competition with parties, change in power with elections that are peaceful, but also a peaceful transfer of power. In a representative democracy, uncertain election outcomes are okay. Popular representation: voters elect representatives and trustees to protect their interests. Majority rules, but you have to respect the rights of the minority. The right of the dissent and disobedience, people like Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. Political equity and equality. Everyone must be able to participate in the system and participate in politics. But like on Animal Farm, some are more equal than others in participation. In representative democracy, you have freedom of the press and freedom of speech. Without media criticism, there is no direct democracy. Stable democracy needs a large, educated middle class. The website Freedom House ranks countries based on their level of democracy. In the 20th century, democracy became more fashionable, especially after World War I and World War II. Unfortunately, between World War I and World War II, democracies had trouble taking hold, which led people to turn to fascism. Why do people turn to fascism? The sense of security and safety led people to do that. When it comes to other aspects, when you talk about types of governments, you have effective, weak, and failed states. Effective states control and tax the entire territories. Laws are obeyed, corruption is minor. The U.S. survived the Watergate scandal because no man was considered above the law at that time. Nixon left the White House without a coup. A weak state is unable to govern effectively. Corruption and crime problems occur. Justice can often be bought. Political institutions command obedience and respect. Democracy is preached more than practiced. This happens in countries like Pakistan and Nigeria. A failed state, a place like Afghanistan, where no government is really strong enough to prevent the outbreak of violence and have no control over the territory or people. These states spend a high proportion of their budgets on military because of the conflict internally. These states seek to acquire more and more weapons to deal with things like this. Many of the arms that are purchased by third world countries are bought from the global north. Failed states can barely govern themselves, causing international tension and international security issues. No effective law or law enforcement is one of the unfortunate traits of a failed state. Totalitarianism is a political system where the state attempts to control citizens, places like North Korea and Iran. Totalitarianism features an all-encompassing ideology, one political party, organized state terror, monopoly of the media, things like that. The USSR was a totalitarian regime with an ideology run by a small group of people, one political party. The KGB scared people. The Gestapo in Germany, Nazi Germany, part of the totalitarian regime. Authoritarianism is characterized by submission to authority, places like China and Cuba and Pakistan. It's opposed to individualism and democracy. Political power is concentrated in a leader or leaders, typically unelected, who possess exclusive and unaccountable and arbitrary powers. Russia is an authoritarian capitalistic regime. The government allows a market economy, but maintains tight political control when it comes to freedom. Authoritarian states can reform. Totalitarian ones cannot. Then you have military governments, often taking power by coups. Military governments are not considered legitimate because of this reason. Coups are often done when the economy is bad, or the military fears they are losing their power and influence. Military governments are generally fragile and not long for this world because they have a problem providing legitimacy, and they're not skilled that well politically. Military governments often have shaky alliances to hold on to power. Why democracy? At times fatigue from authoritarian rule, international pressure. People want freedom from government abuse. People seek democracy for economic reasons. Democracies are financially successful. After the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, countries rushed for democracy. Democracy is hard to do because only a small number of the world's democracies are stable. And people get grumpy. They don't like the way things go. They want to go back to the old ways. Nostalgia sounds nice, but we are the best off today, on this day in history, than going back in time to other time periods. The world is a better place. You say you want to go back to the 1950s, you don't get to bring your iPhone, and you don't get to bring your laptop. You have to live with what's there. Freedom is important, but some democracies offer less freedom. Capitalism doesn't mean democracy. Think about China. Tolerance is a key element when you come to government. Elections hold government leaders accountable in democracies. Federalism. Federalism is a political organization uniting separate political groups within the political system by distributing power among governments designed to protect the existence and authority of all. The United States is a federal system. There is power for the national government, local government, and state government. You have 3 branches of government. This is what makes the U.S. federal system work. The U.S. federal system is where the federal government and states share power constitutionally. The federal system provides political subunits. As I mentioned, local governments, county governments, a great deal of autonomy, where the central government handles issues that are national in scope, such as foreign policy, defense, and monetary policy. State governments control local issues and experiment with different policies that may be copied by other states or institutions. The USSR was federal on paper but not in practice. Post-Soviet order attempted to adopt federalism. Canadian federalism has tensions over language and culture, such as in places like Quebec. Some of the advantages of federalism include citizens are closer to their local governments. States can be more responsive to the needs of the people than the federal government because they're closer to the problems. Federalism has some problems. Complying with federal mandates. Lack of financial resources at times by the subunits to solve problems. The federal government passes a law on the 50 states, and at times it can have 50 different meanings. Sometimes you get a duplication of services and poor coordination. In each state, laws, schools, social policies are different. The way you live your life in Maryland can be very different than how you live your life in California or Mississippi or Alabama. In federalism, states are seen as the weak partner in the federal system, at times middle managers. A confederated system is a system of power where the national government gets its power from the states. Think of the Articles of Confederation or the United Nations. Devolution is the granting of powers from the central government to the local, regional, and state governments. The idea is, instead of the federal government dealing things, have the state governments deal with those. Give them the power to deal with things. Part of the Clinton welfare reform programs in the 1990s dealt with devolution. The idea for a lot of people today is to find ways in American government to turn more power over to the state and local governments, to have them deal with problems instead of the national government worrying about things. This can have very good implications, but remember what I said, 50 different states, 50 different ways of doing things as far as how things are done. There are a lot of challenges to states. Challenges dealing with problems, how they're interpreted, what citizens want. Think about COVID vaccines. 50 states, in many ways 50 different ways of dispersing vaccines and dealing with the problem. Most importantly of all, take care. Have a great day.